Senate will please come to order. Today for devotional, we'll have a moment of silence to gather our thoughts. Thank you. Are there any announcements? Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I'd like to call up H227, which has been ordered to lot.
The senator from Bennington has moved to call up, it's done, apparently has called up. That bill will be on the action calendar for tomorrow. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, we have one bill for under Rule 44A for referral to committee. H452 will be referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We have two Senate bills for introduction, the first being S153, introduced by Senators Vyhovsky and White. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H153, an act relating to creating municipal and regional civilian oversight of law enforcement.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Government Operations. We also have S154, introduced by Senators Hardy and Watson. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S154, an act relating to the Vermont State Plane Coordinate System.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill and is referred to the Committee on Transportation. That brings us to the orders of the day. Our first order of business today is the veto vote of the vote on the governor's veto for S5. On May 4th, 2023, the Honorable Philip B. Scott, Governor, vetoed S5, an act relating to affordably meeting the mandated greenhouse gas reductions for the thermal sector through efficiency, weatherization measures, electrification, and decarbonization, and returned it to the House and submitted a message explaining his objections to the bill. A copy of the veto message is contained in today's calendar on page 2743, and a copy of the bill as passed by the Senate and House is on page 2745 of today's calendar. The authority of the governor to veto a bill passed by both houses of the General Assembly is found in Section 11 of Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the State of Vermont. By reason of the wording of Section 11 and Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the State of Vermont, the Senate is obligated to reconsider S5, I'm going to start that sentence over just to be clear. By reason of the wording of Section 11 of Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the State of Vermont, the Senate is obligated to reconsider S5. The question that you will be voting on is as follows. Shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the governor's refusal to approve the bill? A yes vote means you want to override the governor's veto and pass the bill. A no vote means you want to sustain the governor's veto. As required by the Constitution, the vote will be by roll call. 2/3 of the members who are present must pass the bill over the objections of the governor. Otherwise, the veto of the governor will be sustained. The question before the Senate is debatable. Upon conclusion of the debate, the Secretary shall call the roll. The question is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the governor's refusal to approve the bill? Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Carew.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Gulick.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza. Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershing.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes, with explanation.
Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Bohowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Weston.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
No with explanation.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 20. Those voting nay, 10. Two-thirds of the members present having voted in favor of passage of the bill, the governor's veto has been overridden. Now for the explanations of vote, the senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I truly believe that climate change is real, that even little Vermont has to play its part. I've given a lot of thought and done a lot of research on S5. I've come to the conclusion that it is truly a feasibility study, and nothing can move forward until the legislature and the governor have supported it or determined that it would not work. The hundreds of people that I've heard from, particularly senior citizens, are truly worried and scared. It will be our jobs to help alleviate those fears. Finally, we may see the same results as we did with single payer. Thank you, Mr. President.
For an explanation of vote, the senator from Chittenden North.
Thank you, Mr. President. S5 is a plan that was authored by special interests to benefit foreign-owned energy companies who supply Vermonters with fracked gas extracted with chemicals such as PFAS and electricity made from burning wood in Vermont's forests, from Vermont's forests. If this bill were truly about greenhouse gas reduction, biomass, biofuels, and fracked gas wouldn't get a pass. Instead, those without a seat at the table will pay to enrich those who had one. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank the Senate for taking an orderly vote. What I will ask at this time is that we suspend our rules to message our actions to the House, and by way of explanation, the calendar is such that this might cause the House and the Senate to have to stay another day if we don't message, which is anywhere between $50,000 and $70,000 to the taxpayers. So I would ask that we suspend our rules and message our actions to the House forthwith.
Now the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions on S5 to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to message your actions taken on S5 to the House forthwith. We now have up for consideration H45. H45 had third reading ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H45, an act relating to abusive litigation filed against survivors of domestic abuse, stalking, or sexual assault.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H 45. We now have up for consideration H 461. 461 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Education, which reported that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations that reports that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 461, an act relating to making miscellaneous changes in education laws.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Education, the senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a strike-all amendment to H 461 as passed by the House. Sections 1 through 5 remain unchanged from the bill as passed by the House. Section 6 was also part of the House's version, but this amendment adds the extension of the life of the Act 1 working group. All other amendments in Section 6 were included in the House's version. Sections 1 through 3, this has to do with the shared school district financial data management system. Sections 1 through 3 strike or repeal various pieces of session law that required all school districts to utilize the same school finance and financial data management system by December 1 of 2024. These sections permanently suspend implementation of the shared school district data management system, or SSDDMS, while allowing continued support for any existing or new adopters of the system within the confines of the existing contract. We had testimony that it just wasn't feasible for all districts to be using this system. Section 4 is the National Guard Tuition Benefit Program. This section adds a benefit to the National Guard Tuition Benefit Program. It allows the amount of in-state tuition charged by UVM to be used for courses at a non-Vermont approved post-secondary education institution when the degree program is not offered in Vermont. And we specifically heard that there are folks in the National Guard who would like to get their certification as physician's assistants, and we do not have that program in the state of Vermont. So this will allow them to get training to be physician's assistants outside of the state. Section 5 is the home study program, and it is the bulk of the bill. It takes up many pages. This section makes amendments to 16 VSA, Section 166B, the home study statute. The amendments include eliminating the requirement that academic progress be assessed annually in each subject area of the minimum course of study, and replaces it with an attestation requirement that academic progress will be assessed at the end of each school year, and the parent will maintain records of the assessments. Also eliminating the requirement that a student portfolio contains work samples to demonstrate progress in each subject area in the minimum course of study, and replaces it with a requirement that a portfolio contain 4 samples of student work. It adds 2 new methods to show annual progress: grades from an online academy or school, or evidence of passing the GED. And it eliminates the ability of the Secretary of Education to order a hearing, which may result in the termination of the home study program if the Secretary has concerns about the home study program. So it eliminates that. Section 6, this part is the Vermont Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Act 1 Working Group. The life of the working group is from July 1st, 2023 to September 1st of 2023, and the date by which the working group shall submit recommendations to the state board regarding standards for student performance from December 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2023. And the date, so these dates have been modified, the date by which the State Board of Education shall consider adopting ethnic and social equity standards into standards for student performance from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st of 2023. And then Senate Education added the technical advisory group, the Act 1 technical advisory group. This section creates the technical advisory group to provide ongoing assistance regarding the work of the ethnic and social equity standards, or Act 1 working group, after the Act 1 working group ceases to exist. So it just extends the life. Its membership shall be comprised of a subset of the Act 1 working group's current membership as of August 31st, 2023, and shall cease to exist on January 31st of 2024. The next section of the bill, Section 8, I understand is being removed from the bill as it required an appropriation from the Ed Fund, but I think someone else might speak to that a little bit more. And then sections 9 through 11, this is the last part of the bill, or second to last part of the bill, has to do with signatures, the amount of signatures that one would need to get to be placed on the ballot for school board. And what this does is in some rural parts of the state, there are, it's required to have 60 signatures to get on the ballot. And what we have found is that it's just very difficult for folks to get that many signatures. I live in Burlington in a populated area. I only need 30 signatures. So it seemed odd to us that in these small towns, folks need to get 60 signatures. And frankly, it's not easy to get folks to run for school board. So we want to try to make that process as smooth as possible. So basically, Section 9, the nominating petitions during the formation of a new union school district. This section changes the signature requirement from 60 voters to 30 voters or 1% of the legal voters residing in the proposed new union school district. This change, whichever's less, by the way, under the at-large representation board appropriation model. This change is made under both the Unified Union School District and the Union Elementary High School District sections. Section 10 is the same for a Unified Union School District, and then Section 11 is the same for a Union Elementary or Union High School District. And again, some of the folks who testified just said that they don't even have a grocery store in their district, so there's no gathering place where it's easy for them or relatively easy for them to get signatures. So that's where that is coming from. Section 12 is just the effective dates. Section 7, Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group. And this section shall take effect on passage. And Section 7, Act 1, Technical Advisory Group takes effect on September 1st, 2023. All other sections take effect on July 1st, 2023. The committee heard from a variety of witnesses. We heard from Rita Dunlop, a homeschool advocate with the Vermont Home Education Network, Representative Peter Conlon from the House Committee on Education, Lindsay Hedges, who's a policy communication specialist with the Agency of Education, Emily Simmons, General Counsel, Agency of Education, Ken Bragg, Deputy Adjunct General, Vermont Military Department, Amanda Garces, Director of Policy, Education, and Outreach with the Vermont Human Rights Commission, Representative Lisa Hango, Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, Sue Siglowski, Executive Director from the Vermont School Boards Association, our Ledge Council, who is here as well today, Beth St. James, and Damian Leonard, also with Legislative Council. And the vote in committee was 5-0-0, and we hope that the members of the Senate will agree to our amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which consider the same for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, the Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriations reviewed H461 for appropriations of state funds. There was a $200,000 appropriation for a driver's ed program about getting driver ed instructors some on-the-road, behind-the-wheel training, but that is to come out of the education fund. So even though we passed it out favorably on a 6-0-1 vote, we did so with the understanding that the Committee on Finance would review this since it was ed fund spending, and you will hear from that committee as an amendment. So that was our favorable report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. There is an amendment in the calendar. Would the Senator from Washington care to offer that amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment comes in under my name, but it is with the advice and consent of the Senate Finance Committee. And the amendment moves to strike Section 8 of the bill That is the bill that has to do with the $200,000 appropriation for a pilot program. I wish the Ed Committee had gone through it, but it is as we understand it, there is a shortage of driver's ed teachers. There's a waiting list, and this is an attempt to set up a pilot program. It's not quite clear if the money is paying driver teachers to be there on weekends. It would be kind of a regional moving program. The concern of the Finance Committee is that we just added 3 cents to the tax rate with universal school meals. That will no longer show up on the spreadsheet. It just comes off the top. In my experience, if you ask school boards, what's an unfunded mandate? The first thing they say is driver's ed. We required driver's ed before my time in this building, but the schools have never warmly embraced it. It is a cost that goes on their budget. The concern of the Finance Committee, and this may well be a good idea, but we haven't had time to really look at it and flesh it out. And the concern is, once the state starts funding driver's ed from the body of the ed fund, it's going to be very hard to stop it. There's a good chance within a few years the state will, like universal meals, be paying for driver's ed, and it will just come off the tops. The schools won't have to deal with it in their budgets. It's kind of a hidden 3 cents or 2 cents or whatever it turns out to be. So we are asking to remove this so that we can have a chance to really study it, see if it's a good idea. You know, are we trying to solve a short-term problem, which is lack of driver's ed teachers? Well, I can't think of any teachers we don't have a shortage of. Or is this really something we should be doing long-term? But before we put our foot in the water, we would like a chance to see how deep it is. So we ask you to concur.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to express my gratitude to the Finance Committee. A number of us spent time in there yesterday talking with the committee about this issue, and shared it with the committee yesterday afternoon. And generally, the committee supports the direction that the Finance Committee is moving us in. And we'll look forward to continuing our work on driver's ed over the summer, into the fall, and into next winter. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Education be amended as offered by the Senator from Washington? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Senator from Washington. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
The Senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
Thank you. I am I'm looking at sections 10 and 11 with the change in the number of signatures that are required to run for a school district. In your list of your witnesses, I didn't hear that you had heard from the Secretary of State's office or the Clerks Association. Did you hear from them?
We did not.
Okay, I'm just concerned because generally when we change election law, the Secretary of State's office is consulted, and it's run through the Government Operations Committee. Generally, the signatures are equivalent to the size and percentage of population in a district, and many of these union school districts cover multiple towns. My union school district covers 9 towns, for example. So getting signatures is supposed to be a sort of district-wide, similar to what we do, rather than just one single town. So I'm a little concerned about changing this without having consulted with the Secretary of State's office. So I don't want to hold up the bill now, but I do, before third reading, would like to check in with them and make sure that they feel that this change is okay. So if we might have that conversation before third reading, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Education as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H461. We now have up for consideration H476. 476 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Government Operations that recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which also reviewed the bill and indicated that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H476, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to law enforcement officer training laws.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Government Operations, the Senator from Chittenden Central, Senator Vihovsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Government Operations strike-all amendment can be found on page 2782 of today's calendar. H476 is a bill related to law enforcement officer training, domestic and sexual violence. Section 1 is related to the creation of model policy for law enforcement officers in regard to domestic and sexual violence. The Vermont Law Enforcement Advisory Board is tasked to develop this model policy that all law enforcement agencies must adopt by July 1st of 2024. Section 2 tasks the Vermont Law Enforcement Advisory Board to develop model domestic and sexual violence policy by January 1st of 2024. This updated domestic violence law enforcement model policy shall address domestic violence survivors' needs and leverage best practices in awareness, prevention, and investigation of domestic violence, identify existing support offered to any law enforcement agency, employee, or officer who is the victim of or the person who committed domestic violence, identify new means of supporting law enforcement agency employees or officers who are the victims of or the persons who committed domestic violence, and develop processes to protect the privacy of agency employees and officers who are the victims of domestic violence, and to maintain the confidentiality of any information shared by these individuals. Section 3 is a definition section that is used in this policy, including Category B conduct. Category B conduct means gross professional misconduct amounting to actions on duty or under the authority of the state, or both, that involve willful failure to comply with a state-required policy or substantial deviation from professional conduct, as defined by the law enforcement agency policy, or if not defined by the agency's policy, then as defined by the council policy. It also clarifies in this section that some of the behavior we are discussing can be sanctioned whether it occurs on or off duty, given that we are addressing domestic and sexual violence, which is unlikely to occur while on duty. Section 4 changes current statute that allows for Category A offenses to be sanctioned on a first offense and adds some Category B offenses, including sexual harassment involving physical contact, excessive use of force, placing a person in a chokehold, failing to intervene and report to a supervisor when an officer observes another person placing a person in a chokehold, attempting to cause or causing physical harm to a family or household member, a violation of the domestic violence involving law enforcement model policy. All other Category B offenses can only be sanctioned on a second or subsequent offense. Section 4A tasks the Vermont Criminal Justice Council to report back to the House and Senate Committees on Government Operations on or before December 15th, 2023, as to whether or not the current statutes pertaining to unprofessional conduct should be amended to apply to all off-duty conduct, whether the current statutes pertaining to unprofessional conduct should be amended to adjust the scope of Category B conduct, and that the Vermont Criminal Justice Council may take action on, and any other recommendations as deemed appropriate by the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. The language in this section is in line with the work that the council is doing to overhaul law enforcement training as a whole and was agreed upon by the Council and the Department of Public Safety. It is intended to work in tandem with the larger overhaul of training practices that is being undertaken by the Council. Section 5 asks the Criminal Justice Council to collect and aggregate instances of misconduct, domestic violence, and sexual violence by law enforcement. Section 5A mandates domestic violence training at the Vermont Police Academy. Section 5B moves the funding for the Criminal Justice Council's domestic violence training position from the Domestic Violence Special Fund to the General Fund. The Domestic Violence Special Fund has seen a marked decrease in available funds and can no longer support this position as well as the other things it supports, like the Vermont Network on Domestic and Sexual Violence. So the decision was made to move this position into the General Fund to free up these funds for other work. This important piece of legislation is an acknowledgement that the barriers to reporting domestic and sexual violence are high, and maybe even higher if you have to report them to your abuser's coworkers and friends. We are not asserting that law enforcement officers are more likely to engage in this behavior, but that the nature of their position creates additional barriers for victims to seek help. We were able to come to consensus on this bill with the Department of Public Safety, law enforcement, the Vermont Network, and the Criminal Justice Council. When we took up our work on this bill, we were not sure that that would be possible, but we are proud that we found a way forward to protect the victims of domestic and sexual violence that can be supported by all parties. We heard from Representative Lucy Boyden, who was the reporter of the bill in the House, Tim Devlin from Legislative Counsel at the Office of Legislative Counsel, Jennifer Frank, the Chief of the Windsor Police Department, Jennifer Harlow, Sheriff with the Orleans County Sheriff's Association, Aaron Jacobson, an Assistant Attorney General at the Attorney General's Office, Kevin Lane, a Major with the Department of Public Safety, Jennifer Morrison, Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, Mike O'Neill, Executive Director of the Vermont Troopers Association, Sarah Robinson, Deputy Director of the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, Heather Simons, the Executive Director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, William Sorrell, the Chair of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, and Karen Tronsgaard Scott, the Executive Director of the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. The vote in your Senate Government Operations Committee was 6-0-0, and we ask for the Senate's support. Thank you.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, the Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, the Appropriations Committee reviewed the bill, and we do not see any major impact on the budget of the state of Vermont. But we thank the Government Operations Committee for the bill. As most of us know, domestic violence is unfortunately the most common crime in Vermont. And I will add that in the budget, the Senate added a position specifically to work on model policies and other policies for the Criminal Justice Training Council. The vote in the Senate Appropriations Committee in support of the bill is 5-0-2. We urge the body to approve. Thank you.
So the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, you have adopted the report of the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H476. We now have up for consideration H157. Third reading was ordered on H157. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H157, an act relating to the Vermont Basic Needs Budget.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H157. We now have up for consideration H291. Third reading was ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H291, an act relating to the creation of the Cybersecurity Advisory Council.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it, The ayes do have it, and you have passed H291. We now have up for consideration H386. Third reading was ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H386, an act relating to approval of amendments to the charter of the town of Brattleboro.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call's been requested. Senator from Rutland. Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Titman.
Nay.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Calder.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Hewitt.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Engel.
No.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
No.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Perschlip.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
No.
Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Bukowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks. Senator Westman.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner. Senator Weeks. Senator Renner.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 18. Those voting nay, 10. And you have passed H386. We now have up for consideration H470. Third reading has been ordered on H470. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H470, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to alcoholic beverage laws.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H470. We now have up for consideration H282. 282 is read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which considers the same and recommends the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance, which reviewed the bill and also recommends the bill ought to pass. And then the bill is referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which reviewed the bill and recommends the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H282, an act relating to the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, the Senator from Addison, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill can be found on page 2788, although we made no changes, so I think is it not being passed out, Mr. Secretary?
I think there might be something being handed out. I'll check with the Secretary.
I will carry on, though, while that is sorted out. It is 45 pages long and very complicated, but it is the first of 4 interstate healthcare compacts that you will hear today and tomorrow from your Senate Health and Welfare Committee. So just as an introduction to what is a healthcare compact, compacts are an agreement or a contract between states. There are many compacts in our lives. An example of a compact is driver's licenses. In the driver's license compact, a driver from one state is allowed to drive in all other states because of that compact. Most compacts have the concept of a home state. This is the state where the licensee lives, votes, etc. After someone has a compact license in their home state, they are immediately authorized to practice in all other compact states, or they have to ask the Compact Commission for the authority to practice in another state. This can sometimes be accompanied by an additional fee. And if the license moves to a new state, then they have to apply for a new compact license in their new home state. Compacts are effective tools in occupational licensure. They solve some of the mobility challenges of having a license because they allow someone to practice in a state that they don't live in or immediately when they move to a new state. They also enable telehealth across state lines when both states are members of the compact. They also are an especially important tool for members of the military and their families, or other people who move around from state to state, so that they or members of their family can easily have licensure privileges in a new state without delay. Compacts usually have a revenue impact because it removes the requirement of an out-of-state practitioner to get a Vermont license to provide care to clients or patients in Vermont. And this is a relevant factor when you are a small state where people can easily travel across state lines to work. But compacts are also affect the enforcement process. But in compacts, Vermont retains jurisdiction over everyone who is practicing in Vermont, physically or via telehealth. And this means that under a compact, we could be investigating and prosecuting a person who is not a Vermont licensee. So we retain anybody who's practicing here, we retain jurisdiction over them. So that is an important consideration in compacts. So the H-282 is related to a psychology interjurisdictional compact. And this was a compact that was developed by the Council of State Governments National Center for Interstate Compacts. It currently includes 36 states, including New Hampshire and Maine, who have adopted the compact. So we could potentially be the 37th state to adopt it. Participating psychologists are not authorized to engage in the full practice of psychology in the other compact states. Rather, the Psy-Pact, as it's often known, which sounds super cool, enable participating psychologists from member states to provide either telepsychology services in another state and or practice temporarily in a member state. So when you move someplace or if you're going to be someplace temporarily to practice, you could do so, and also through telepsychology. As many of us know, during the public health emergency caused by COVID, having the ability to do telehealth and telepsychology or telecounseling has been really crucial to a lot of people who rely on mental health counseling or other type forms of counseling. Under Psy-Pact, an eligible psychologist from a member state may provide telepsychology services to a patient or client who is in another member state if the psychologist obtains 2 credentials in addition to a full license in the member state: an e-passport from the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, and an authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology from the Psy-Pact Compact Commission. There is an initial fee that is paid to the compact in order to do that. For the temporary practice under the Psy-Pact, an eligible psychologist from a member state may practice for a maximum of only 30 days. So it's very limited in another state, another member state, if they obtain the following 2 credentials: an interjurisdictional practice certificate from the board, or a temporary authorization to practice from the Psy-Pact Compact Commission. And there is also an initial fee of $200 for that. To be eligible to receive an e-passport to provide telepsychology or a temporary, an IPC to provide temporary practice in another state, a psychologist must have a current active doctoral level license to practice psychology in a member state, have no disciplinary actions against their license, and have graduated from American Psychology Associated accredited psychology doctoral program. And they must, for the telepsychology, the applicant must also demonstrate passage of the national exam and complete 3 hours of continuing education annually prior to renewing their e-passport. The benefits of this compact and many other compacts are mostly that it it improves the mobility of the health practitioner. This SIPAC is more limited than other compacts that you will hear of later. It's just the narrow 30-day temporary practice or telehealth practice. So that's a really important thing to understand. This is not as broad as other compacts. And it is only for doctoral level psychologists. So it will have a limited impact, but an important impact on people who rely on these practitioners to receive mental health counseling or other treatment, particularly with a shortage of practitioners in many states, including Vermont. Another important thing to note about these types of compacts is that states approve the compacts in their state law, and generally they approve the compact as written, modified to be consistent with our standards and our style in our own statutes. But we have very limited ability to modify parts of the compact. It's more or less an all or nothing thing. We're either in the compact or we're out of the compact. We also have a representative who represents the state of Vermont at the National Board for Compacts. So we do have the ability to, once we are a member of the compact, to have a seat at the table for any changes to the compact laws, including the rules of the compact, and then if there are any changes to state law that are proposed, we would have to change our state law before the full compact. All 36 plus members would have to change it before the legislative language in the compact changes. We are able to remove ourselves from compact by introducing a bill and approving that bill that would remove ourselves from the compact. This bill was passed out of committee on a vote of 5-0-0. We heard from a few witnesses. The House heard from many more witnesses, but we heard from, of course, our Legislative Counsel, the Secretary of State's Office of Professional Regulation, and from the Chief Psychologist and Manager of Psychology Services at the University of Vermont Medical Center. Again, the vote was 5-0-0. I'm happy to try to answer some questions if there are anything about the very specific technical language in the bill, but we ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance for the report of the Committee on Finance, the Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had 4 compact bills go through. This was the last one, and it would have been much easier if we'd started with the others because they are all very similar, and my report would probably be ditto. But this is the one that's the outlier. It is a little different. The biggest difference is that the other compacts allow for a privilege fee. So if you're working here under a compact, other compacts, you get to pay a $50 fee for the privilege of working in Vermont. This one does not allow that. So there is no offsetting revenue to the loss of license fees. But this is also a much more limited compact. We looked at it. We heard from the Office of Professional Regulation and from Joint Fiscal. There are presently 534 psychologists licensed in Vermont. 106 of those are from another state, and so it's quite likely they would go to a compact fee. And then others may come or go. We are trying to predict human behavior, and that's difficult. So these are our best estimates. The cost would be $1,000 a year in a membership fee. And then we think the first year, because this would come up as licenses come up for renewal, first year there would be minimal impact, but the estimate is there would probably be an $18,000 base impact. And your Finance Committee voted to support that 4-1-2. Thank you.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. The appropriations report is similar to the finance report. We reviewed the bill for this potential loss of revenue that was mentioned by the report of the bill and from the reporter of the finance report. We found that to be a de minimis impact on the fisc, as some might call it, and the vote was 7-0-0. Thank you.
So the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H282. We now have up for consideration H31. H31 was read the first time, referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. It recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Yes, when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which also recommended that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H31, an act relating to aquatic nuisance control.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, the Senator from Addison.
Mr. President, may I report on the bill as well as the amendment?
You may.
The amendment appears, a very brief amendment, appears in today's calendar on page 2788. There's the copies of the bill are being passed out as we speak. H31 is an act relating to aquatic nuisance control. As people, I think, are probably likely aware that in the state of Vermont, we have roughly 870 ponds and lakes. Some of them have been, aquatic nuisances that move in. These could be in the form of living animals, a spiny flea, or it could be in the form of milfoil, which is probably the thing that people are most aware of. In order to manage lakes and their balance public uses, as well as maintain their role in the natural ecosystem, in some instances, pesticides, herbicides are used on those lakes to control particularly plant life. There is some controversy as to whether such lakes should be managed to maximize the wildlife in that pond or reduce the aquatic nuisance in order to maximize the recreational value to those who come to that pond. So it's a balancing act, and I'm guessing that every member of the Senate has probably heard conversations at home about how a lake or pond ought to be best managed in their district. Because of the controversy, this bill proposes creating an aquatic nuisance control study committee in order to come back to the legislature next session with recommendations as to how we might make adjustments in the future if merited. So it sets up, in essence, it creates a study committee. And the membership is laid out in section 1, subsection B. 2 current members of the House, 2 current members of the Senate, the Commissioner of Health or designee, a scientist from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a scientist from the Department of Environmental Conservation. The panel is charged with meeting and coming back to us with a summary of the uses of pesticides, chemicals other than pesticides, and biological controls in the lakes and ponds of Vermont since January 1, 2000, including types of pesticides, chemicals other than pesticides, and biological controls approved for use and why they were approved instead of non-chemical controls. There are additional charges in terms of what information should be brought back. The non-chemical controls would include things like hand harvesting of milfoil, which probably many people have witnessed at various ponds around the state. Once this information is brought back to the committee, to the legislature, it's delivered to us on December 15th of 2023. in order to facilitate writing future legislation as merited. The meetings are also authorized. They are called by the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. The terms of how it's organized and compensation reimbursement are spelled out in that section and G, and in section H there are definitions cross-referenced to current statute. The effective date is on passage. The Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee proposed one change, and that is the one on page 2788 in the calendar. That was moving out the commencement date for the first meeting from July 31, 2023 to September 1, 2023. And the rationale for that extra month is that it's very hard to convene panels in the month of August and to set them up and establish them. So rather than have a panel start late, we thought it'd be reasonable to give them more time to organize and commence on September 1st. The committee took testimony from 14 witnesses. We heard from Commissioner Beeling of the Department of Environmental Conservation, the bill sponsor, Representative Seth Baumgartz, the president of the Lake Bomazene Preservation Trust, Luca Conte, the Rivers Program Manager from the Department of Environmental Conservation, Rob Evans, John Policy and Water Program Director of Vermont Natural Resources Council, John Grogman, a citizen of Hubbardton, Jan Jones, Deputy Chief Counsel, Michael O'Grady, citizen of Middlebury, Albert Perry, former member of the House, Lakes and Ponds Program Manager of the Department of Environmental Conservation, Oliver Pearson, Lake Keeper from Lake Champlain, Julie Silverman, citizen, also former member of the House, Bob Stannard of Lake Bomazene, Rob Steele, owner of Tom's Bake Shop, and the Lindsay Waterhouse of the Lake Bomazene Association. Senate Natural Resources and Energy asked the Senate to support the bill as amended, and our vote was 5-0-0.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which consider the same, and for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, the Senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Appropriations reviewed, in particular, the committee that has been proposed for Aquatic Nuisance Control Study, that is the Aquatic Nuisance Control Study Committee. And given the issue of controversy that shrouds these decisions, the committee felt that the addition of scientists from the University of Vermont, appointed by the president of the University of Vermont with expertise in potential human health impacts related to the invasives and control eradication, and one scientist from the University of Vermont with expertise in aquatic biology, including flora, fauna, and ecosystem health, would be an improvement to the study committee. And we also then suggested the reduction of the number of legislators on the committee, so moving it from 2 to 1 for the House of Representatives and from 2 to 1 for the Senate. This will allow for the inclusion of objective data and some informed decision-making by the committee. We did work with the Chair of Natural Resources and Energy, as well as with Legislative Council, and then reached out to the University of Vermont, and they indicated an interest and about participating in the study committee. The cost, we feel, is de minimis, and we've expanded the reimbursement so that we will include anyone who's newly appointed to receive a per diem. The vote in committee was 6-0-1. Thank you, Mr. President.
We have 2 votes to take on this. They'll be in slightly different order than typically because they're both amending the bill, not one amending the other report, but that should be fine. The first vote is the vote on the adoption of the report of the Committee on Natural Resources. And the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Natural Resources? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. The second vote now is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Addison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the work and the contribution of the Appropriations Committee. Strengthening the scientific panel will be helpful to all legislators when we get that information back.
The question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H31. We now have up for consideration H62. H62 can be found on today's calendar on page 2790. H62 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which considered the same and recommended that when the bill be amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. And then the Committee on Appropriations, I recommend that when the bill be amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H62, an act relating to the Interstate Counseling Compact.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill, and for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, the senator from Chittenden Central, Senator Gulick.
Thank you, Mr. President. It appears to be Compact Day in the Vermont Senate today. I'm presenting H62, which is the Counseling Compact Report. We all know the value of counseling services for treating mental health issues, but the COVID pandemic exposed great disparities in our healthcare system and the urgent needs for improved access to care. Joining an interstate counseling compact is one way to remove barriers to mental health and improve the accessibility of quality care. The senator from Addison already outlined what a compact is and the requirements for each participating state. So I think I'll just go through each section relatively quickly. Section 1 of this bill adds the Counseling Compact as a new subchapter 2 in Title 26, Chapter 65. And the sections are the purpose, the definitions, state participation in the compact, the privilege to practice, obtaining a new home state license based on privilege, active duty military personnel or their spouses, compact privilege to practice telehealth, adverse actions, establishment of counseling compact commission, the data system, the rulemaking, the oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement, the date of implementation and associated rules and withdrawal and amendment, and the construction and severability, and the binding effect of compact and other laws. This bill establishes a $50 privilege to practice for licensees of a remote state practicing in Vermont. Vermont counselors are not obliged to join the compact and can pay for only a Vermont license if they prefer. Section 2 of the bill amends 3 VSA section 123J1 to include a criminal background check that uses FBI records and authorizes the Vermont OPR, Office of Professional Regulation, to exchange identification records for licensing and employment as required under federal law. Section 3 of the bill outlines the effective dates, July 1st, 2023, except at Section 1, the compact, and Section 3, the fees, shall take effect on July 1st, 2024. The joint fiscal notes that there will be no fiscal impacts in 2024. In 2025, we'll see an estimated revenue loss of $54,800. Obviously, the benefits of joining this compact, it's a tool to balance the counseling shortages across state boundaries. A counselor may practice in each state that is party to the compact. It supports armed forces spouse interstate transfers. And there are many states already part of this compact. I won't read them all, but they're there. And we took testimony on H62 from Representative Daisy Berbecca, who was the reporter in the House Committee on Healthcare, Katie McGlynn, Legislative Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State, Secretary of State's Office, Lauren Lehman, General Counsel, Office of Professional Regulation, Secretary of State's Office, Melissa Willett, New England Regional Liaison, Defense State Liaison Office, Department of Defense, Military Community and Family Policy. The vote in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee was 5-0-0, and our committee hopes that you will support Vermont's participation in modern interstate healthcare and vote yes. Thank you, Mr. President.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, all these estimates are based on what we know in current numbers. It is estimated, as previously reported, that we would probably lose $54,800 in licensing fees for counselors who are licensed, that are presently a Vermont license that would go to a compact license. But that is offset because this compact allows us to charge a $50 privilege fee. The estimate is that that would give us $12,700, which leaves us with a loss of $42,100 as the estimate. We find this to be de minimis. Compacts are the wave of the future, and we're either going to ride with that wave or it's going to come over us. We're hoping it will help us answer some of our shortages in professionals, and your Finance Committee finds this to be de minimis and voted 6-0-1 to approve.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, and for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, the other senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. This senator from Washington has almost the exact same report as the other senator from Washington gave, that we found the impact on the Treasury to be de minimis, and we support the bill and voted out favorably. The only difference between our report and the finance report is we voted out 7-0-0.
The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Health and Welfare? Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter?
The senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I apologize. I believe the answer to this is yes, but I just want to make sure all of this work that we're doing is going to allow college students, for example, who might be connected to a counselor in their local community. They go away to school, they can then use that counselor back home. All that kind of stuff can now happen because of this work.
If the counselor is part of the compact, then the answer is yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I appreciate the committee's work on this. I know a number of college students and their families have reached out to me wanting to make certain that this kind of thing can happen, and this is great. Thank you.
The question now is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H62. We now have up for consideration H67. H67 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, which considered the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance, which considered the same and recommend that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H67, an act relating to household products containing hazardous substances.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill, and now for the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, for the third time in a row, the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. H67 is a great springtime bill because as we all go home to do some spring cleaning, if you're like me, you might have some old containers of hazardous waste in the back of your garage. For me, I'm thinking specifically about some paint thinner I will probably never use again. So how do I know that this is household hazardous waste? These are chemicals that have labels that say things like danger, warning, or caution.
In order to dispose of this paint thinner, under our current system, I would wait until my local solid waste management entity holds a hazardous waste collection day. They're required to hold at least 2 collection days per year where they take back household hazardous waste at no direct cost to me for disposing of it. Instead, the cost of disposal for these chemicals is borne by the local solid waste management entity. And how does the solid waste management entity pay for this? Through its member municipalities, and so ultimately property taxes as well as through other disposal fees. While this system has worked well from the perspective of the public, since it's free and convenient, it has not worked well for the solid waste management entities. Why not? They're doing a great job, but as you can imagine, the hazardous waste is expensive to dispose of, not to mention dangerous to handle. These hazardous waste collection days can cost $12,000 to $15,000 to run, and the costs to hold these days have increased about 50% since COVID. When turnout is low, it can mean that a solid waste management entity has effectively spent hundreds of dollars per participant, hardly an effective use of money and a drain on our solid waste management entity's resources. And ultimately, as I said, we're all paying for that inefficiency through our property taxes and other disposal fees. If there's only one thing that you take away from my full report, I hope it's this: H67 shifts the burden of disposing of household hazardous waste from the solid waste management entities to the product manufacturers. Basically, if you make a mess, then you've got to clean it up. I have a feeling that I will be saying that a lot as my toddler grows up. If you manufacture a toxic product, you should have a plan for disposal. In the findings of the bill, you'll see that already solid waste management entities are spending $2.2 million a year to manage household hazardous waste. And even with all that spending, 855 tons of household hazardous waste still ends up in landfills. So it's no surprise that both the solid waste management entities and ANR are supportive of H67. If we're going to make progress keeping household hazardous waste out of the landfill and funding our disposal more effectively, we need the producers to take responsibility for the disposal of their products. This is likely to have multiple beneficial side effects. We heard testimony that if manufacturers are responsible for the disposal of their products, they may be motivated to find less hazardous alternatives to be components in those products to make disposal easier and cut down on the waste from the start. Similarly, manufacturers may be motivated to right-size their products so that there's less likely to be hazardous waste left over once a consumer has used it. For those two reasons, we're likely to see a decrease in the overall cost of disposal of hazardous waste because of H67. So how does this work? H67 is a kind of extended producer responsibility law where the producers are held financially responsible for the disposal of the product. Vermont already has multiple successful examples of extended producer responsibility laws. H67 is modeled after these. Such programs already exist for disposable batteries and electronics, and similar to those programs, manufacturers will be required to form and join a stewardship organization, which will submit a collection plan to the Agency of Natural Resources for paying for disposal of their products. If any manufacturer fails to participate in the stewardship organization, then they will no longer be permitted to sell their product in Vermont. Over time, the stewardship organization will have to report back to ANR on meeting their goals. The plan they submit could be as simple as reimbursing solid waste management entities for their hazardous waste collection days, or subsidizing permanent collection locations, or it could be as complicated as treating each individual product separately. But the point is that the details of the plan will be up to the stewardship organization, composed of the manufacturers themselves. So regarding the financing of the program, may I read from the Chittenden Solid Waste District's written testimony on H67? Cool. Like most extended producer responsibility laws, the bill is silent on how the manufacturers will pay for the program, leaving it to the manufacturers and the stewardship organization to determine. The typical mechanism used to pay for extended producer responsibility programs is for the stewardship organization to assign a portion of the program cost to manufacturers based on their market share of the covered products. The program is not paid for by a fee on products at retail and is very unlikely that this program will result in price increases for consumers purchasing hazardous products in Vermont. Most products are sold nationally or even globally, making a price increase just for Vermont impossible or impractical under current distribution methods. I know it will be very tempting to play the game of what's in and what's out, so I'm going to try to explain it in a concise way, but if afterwards you still have questions, happy to answer. I've also provided a handout of what's covered. For the purposes of H67, household hazardous waste is any consumer good that is flammable, corrosive, poisonous, toxic, or reactive. H67 also covers gas cylinders, which are problematic when they end up in landfills. Just to name a few so you can get the idea of what we're talking about bleach, ammonia, oven cleaners, floor wax, antifreeze, etc., are all considered hazardous waste. For those of you who remember Mr. Yuck, it's that kind of thing. So now to the bill. Section 1 contains the findings, some of which I've already mentioned. Section 2 is the bulk of the bill and outlines the mechanics of the program. Just want to highlight a few of the important parts of this program, how it works, and where Natural Resources made some changes. Section 2 starts with definitions, and subdivision 4 is where you'll find the definition of what is covered and what is exempt. Under what's covered, it's important to note that the product must still be in the container that it came in. The labels that tell you the product, what the product is, are important for proper disposal in accounting for which manufacturers made it. As for exemptions, you'll see a list of that includes things like batteries, lamps, or thermostats with mercury, flea and tick collars, etc. These things are out because they're already covered by other statutes or programs. For example, they may have their own extended producer responsibility program, or they're a pesticide. The Natural Resources Committee added rechargeable batteries to the list of exemptions because apparently they are about to have an extended producer responsibility program. We also added an exemption for gas cylinders that are found by ANR to not be a risk to human health or in the environment. So this might be things like spent oxygen tanks. The Natural Resources Committee also modified the stewardship organization definition to require that they must be a 501c3. Section 7182 specifies that manufacturers will be prohibited from selling their products in Vermont unless they're participating in a stewardship organization with an approved collection plan. This section starts a series of changes that the Natural Resources Committee made to the bill that either pushes out the deadlines or changes the date certain to a time frame in which action needs to be completed, triggered by prior parts of the timeline. So for example, originally the bill said that the stewardship organization would need to register with ANR by July 1st of 2024. The Natural Resources Committee pushed that out 6 months to January 1st of 2025. The prohibition on selling your product in Vermont unless you're part of the stewardship organization is no longer July 1st, 2025, but rather 6 months after ANR determines whether the stewardship organization's collection plan is sufficient. Altogether, this pushes the timeline out about 6 months. Section 7183 puts forward a list of minimum requirements for the collection plan. It's worth noting that the collection plan must provide free collection of household hazardous waste. It's free to the public to return this stuff now, and it must continue to be free. This is important because if proper disposal of the costs anything, they are likely just to dump it or put it in the regular trash. Each stewardship plan must have a collection goal regarding the percentage of total households that participate in the program. For the first year, the goal is set at 5%. And I realize that might sound pretty low, but keep in mind that you probably don't need to go to the hazardous waste collection event every time it's offered. We heard testimony that a household only needs to dispose of hazardous waste every 7.4 years. So that puts us at a modest 37% of the population, but the hope is that the participation rates will grow as the program matures. Senate Natural Resource and Energy Committee also added that public education must be a part of the stewardship plan. Section 7185 outlines that there is an annual report required on the outcomes of the collection plan, and every 5 years there's to be a collection plan audit conducted by an independent third party. Here again, instead of a specific date for the first annual report, we've changed that to 18 months after the collection plan has been implemented. And the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee gave manufacturers more flexibility with their data. If they do not have Vermont-specific data, then they can use national data prorated for Vermont's population. In Section 7187, the committee made it clear that ANR would only approve one stewardship organization rather than many for the first collection plan, which should make it easier for ANR to manage. Section 3 outlines that by next January 15th, the Secretary of ANR will recommend a fee for the registration of a stewardship organization. Section 4 adds household hazardous products as material that should not be in landfills after July 1st, 2025. Section 5 requires the household hazardous waste collection plan go through a Type 3 public notice procedure. This includes posting a plan on the agency's notice bulletin and allows for anyone to request a public meeting on the proposed plan. Section 6 gives the Secretary of ANR enforcement power related to the collection and management of household hazardous products. Section 7 outlines the appeal process for this program and makes it similar to many other appeal processes already established in statute for ANR. The Natural Resources and Energy Committee heard from VPIRG, the Product Stewardship Institute, the Director of Waste Management Division for A&R, Representative Carrie Dolan, who sponsored the bill in the other body, the Associated Industries of Vermont, American Cleaning Institute, Casella Waste Management, Household and Commercial Products Association, Chittenden Solid Waste District, Northwest Vermont Solid Waste Management District, MMR, and Michael O'Grady from our own Legislative Council. The Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee found H67 favorable with a vote of 5-0-0 and asked for the support of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator from Washington. The bill also was committed to the Committee on Finance. For the favorable finance report, I would look to the Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Finance Committee reviewed the report and of the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. Because these duties are carried out at the municipal and regional level through solid waste districts, there is not an impact on the state's revenues and or a de minimis impact. And the committee voted favorably on the bill with a vote of 6-0-1.
Thank you, Senator from Addison. The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Franklin.
Mr. President, may I interrogate the reporter of the underlying bill?
Reporter of the bill will be interrogated.
Mr. President, as I look at the bill itself, I see that there is a provision to collect information regarding the cost of the program. I didn't see anything, though, relative to understanding the cost to the consumer. There was mention that because many of these organizations are national organizations, there might be difficulty for them to assign a cost to Vermont. And I'm wondering what evidence the committee heard that supports that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did hear that other extended producer responsibility programs similar to this have not seen an increase in those other products.
Mr. President, were those similar programs to this one that are in other states? And is this a widespread activity in other states?
Thank you, Mr. President. I can speak to other extended producer responsibility programs that we have in Vermont, not to other programs in the United States. I believe we did hear that there are some similar programs in Canada.
Mr. President, I just wondered, I thank the reporter of the bill for the information she's provided. I just wondered, given the state of information technology capability among manufacturers, the notion that this is a free program that we get for absolutely nothing at no cost to anyone makes me have some concerns. The ability of someone to know what product they are producing and where it goes and where to assign the cost is a data problem that is not particularly hard to do, not particularly hard to set prices and to look at price targets as to how sales of particular products go to states. Presumably, there would also be a decrease in cost to our local collection areas that now go to the property tax, but somewhere there's got to be an increase in cost that somebody is bearing. And the only question is it being bared nationwide, or is it being potentially borne by the citizens of Vermont for a program like this? I gather we don't have any real estimates as to what this is going to cost. We sort of have to wait and see for the program to be developed and then take our chances. I would love to have seen perhaps more precise language about this in this particular bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question again is, shall the bill, Senator from Washington.
Thank you. Just in further, in hopes to answer the question, we did push on this issue, wondering about the availability of data specific to Vermont, and we're told that due to the distributors that end up providing this product across across Vermont, it's not limited to Vermont, and so getting Vermont-specific data would be very difficult. As someone who loves data, I asked that if we could see Vermont-specific data, and we were told that that would be very difficult to get, which is why the Natural Resources and Energy Committee gave them more leeway to use national data.
Thank you. Question again is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended H67 as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. Question now is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of H67. We now have on the action calendar H77, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Physical Therapy Licensure Compact. And Health and Welfare Committee recommends passage of the bill. For that report, I would turn to, please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H77, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Physical Therapy Licensure Compact.
And for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, I would, one moment, please. If I might inquire of the Chair of Health and Welfare, Senator Weeks was slated to do that report. Shall we pass over, or would you be?
Pass over, Mr. President. On the other hand, the bill is so consistent with other compact bills, I may be able to give some information about the bill. And if it's not satisfactory, then we can pass over.
That sounds like an action plan. I will recognize the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an act relating to physical therapy licensure for both physical therapists and physical therapist assistants who are regulated under the Board of Medical Practice. So what this does is it allows for our physical therapists and their assistants to have to join the compact licensure process and to practice in other states, and at the same time for those states that are in the compact for physical therapists to practice in the state of Vermont. Mr. President, we did hear from OPR and others about the benefit of this bill and allowing for the state to participate. We did hear from the national director for compacts and others. We also heard from OPR that has the compact office embedded in it. And I would ask, and the other piece that you may hear about as we go forward is that there are privilege fees associated with the physical therapy compact. So there will be a median at where we believe about a $50 fee that we will receive for participation in the compact in the state of Vermont. So that is my report, Mr. President, and I ask that the Senate concur with the Senate committee. Our vote was 5-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The bill was also committed to the Committee on Finance, which reports favorably. For that report, I would look to the senior senator from Washington County, Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I assume ditto is not an allowable report. So I will say that on this one, the net of lost revenue plus gain privilege fees is $23,200, and your Committee on Finance found that to be negligible and voted to support the bill 601.
Thank you, Senator. The bill further was committed to the Committee on Appropriations. I believe there is also a substitute amendment, so I will look to the senator from Washington, Senator Perchlik, for the report. Favorable.
Mr. President, I think you're referring to the next bill on the.
Oh, my mistake, Senator.
So you have a.
So I will look to the senator from Washington for an appropriations report on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will give a compact report, which is this. We voted the bill out favorably, 7-0-0.
Compact indeed. With that said, the question is, I believe, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And you have ordered third reading of H77. We now have H86, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact. For the health and welfare report on that bill, following second reading, I'll look to Senator Williams. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H86, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact.
And for the report from Health and Welfare, I would recognize the senator from Rutland, Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. My report can be found on page 2805. Here today to report Bill H86, an act relating to Vermont's adaptation of the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact. Compact is an agreement between the states that allows medical professionals to practice within the group of states within the compact without needing multiple expensive licenses. H86 would enter Vermont into the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact, or ASLPIC. There are currently 23 states participating in this compact, including New Hampshire, with another 5 states having enacted legislation to join. By entering into this compact, Vermont agrees to mutually recognize other states' audiologists and speech-language pathologist licenses, as well as rules promulgated by the ASLPIC Commission. Each participating state must use recognized national examinations for licensure, meet their home state's qualifications for license, notify the ASLPIC Commission of any adverse action on licensees, require criminal background checks using the FBI records check, use the ASLPIC Commission's data system, require continuing educations for license renewals. Section 1 divides Chapter 87 of Title 26 into 2 subchapters to make room for placing the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact into statute. Section 2 adds the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Interstate Compact as a subchapter in Chapter 87 of Title 26. Section 3 adds a new subchapter to 26 VSA, Section 67, the Audiology Professional Chapter, to acknowledge the compact's existence and adds cross-references to the compact language of Chapter 87. Section 4 authorizes the Office of Professional Regulation to do the necessary background checks required by the compact for audiologists and speech-language pathologists. Section 5 amends the educational requirements for the practice of audiology in Title 26 to include the compact's requirement that the audiologists have a doctoral degree to participate in the compact. Section 6 establishes a separate $50 privilege to practice fee for licensees of a remote state practicing in Vermont under the compact. And Section 7 effective date. This act shall be effective upon 1 July 2023, except that sections 1 through 3, audiology and speech pathologist interstate compact. The Section 6 fees shall take effect in July 1, 2024. We had a list of witnesses, which included Representative Bobby Fairley Rubio, reporter from the House Committee on Health Care, Cameron Abajali, Legislative Counsel, Linda Hazard, Program Director, Vermont Early Learning Detection, Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, University of Vermont Medical Center, Susan Adams, Director of State Legislative and Regulatory Affairs, American Speech Language Hearing Association, Melissa Clark, Audiologist, Vermont Speech Language Hearing Association, Sierra Downs, Speech Language Pathologist, Lauren Hibbard, Deputy Secretary of State, Secretary of the State's Office, Lauren Lehman, General Counsel, Office of Professional Regulations, Secretary of the State's Office. Mr. President, your Health and Welfare Committee voted 5-0-0 in favor, and we recommend passage.
Thank you, Senator from Rutland. The bill was committed to the Committee on Finance, which reports favorably. For that report, I would look to the senior senator from Washington, Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, it is estimated that the revenue loss will be $17,200, but we will pick up $3,500 in $50 privilege fees for a net loss of $13,700. That again is all based on the best predictions we can make. Your Committee on Finance finds this to be de minimis and voted 6-0-1 to support the bill.
Thank you, Senator. The bill from the Finance Committee moved to the Appropriations Committee. For that report, I would look to the senator from Washington, Senator Perchley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Appropriations Committee, as far as the financial impacts, agreed with the report of Church Finance. We didn't find a problem with those as being de minimis. However, we did get some technical changes requested of the committee and shepherded by the chair of the Committee on Health and Welfare that's also on appropriations. You'll see that we have an amendment on page 2806 and then a substitute amendment on 2809, which really, if you wanted to look at it, it's really between pages 2810 and 2813. These changes, Senator, are mostly technical.
If I might suggest, it is possible to substitute first, and then that would allow us to limit discussion to the substitute amendment. So if you would like to make that motion.
Yes, I would like to move to the substitute amendment.
The senator from Washington has moved that the substitute amendment listed on page 2809 be substituted for the original amendment, which appears on 2806. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it, and you have substituted the amendment shown on page 2809 for the appropriations report. With that said, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this amendment is almost all technical changes or just updating of statute. The one thing you might notice if you were to look at it is the term deaf-blind as one word with both deaf and blind capitalized. We are assured by Leg Counsel that that is not an error, and that is the appropriate way to list deaf-blind. So we made other changes just to the statute. The reason we needed a substitute amendment is because the CART services, which are the communication access real-time translation services, were not included. So that was added in the substitute amendment. That's the only difference really from the original amendment. So these are really just technical changes to update the language on this compact, but it's similar to the other compacts, and we voted the bill out favorably on a vote of 7-0-0. And the amendment was voted 7-0-0.
Thank you, Senator. Question will be, shall the bill be amended as recommended in the substitute amendment shown on page 2809 by the Appropriations Committee? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the substitute amendment?
Reporter, the substitute amendment will be interrogated.
Thank you. I'm trying to follow where this substitute amendment comes into the bill. Is this amending the language in the actual compact, or is this amending the practice of providing these services outside of the compact?
It amends section 7 of the bill. I don't think it affects the compact. I'm assuming it doesn't because I know we're not allowed to do that. I think I could either answer the question on third reading, or maybe the chair of Health and Welfare might have an answer to that question. I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. I thank the senator. Mr. President, may I inquire of the chair of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee?
The senator from Chittenden Southeast will be interrogated as the chair of the committee.
Mr. President, you heard my question. I'm wondering if you might have that answer.
I don't have that answer.
Okay.
You can get it for third reading.
All right. Thank you very much.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I may have the answer. When we received the budget from the other body, it included language that was really cleanup of the statute and making sure the terminology was correct. We felt that the budget was not the right vehicle. And so we were thinking that something related to policy or bill coming out of health and welfare would be more appropriate. And so when we got the audiology bill, we simply added this language to deal with the obsolete language that was current in the statute. So that is how that amendment ended up on the audiology bill. It doesn't change the compact or anything. It is just the vehicle by which we updated the terminology. Thank you.
The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as substituted? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as substituted. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H86. We now have for consideration H126. H126 was referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, which considered the same and recommended that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Appropriations that offered that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H126, an act relating to community resilience and biodiversity protection.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, the senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'm reporting on H126, an act relating to community resilience and biodiversity protection. It appears in your calendar beginning on page 2813. The bill at heart is a simple bill. It defines conservation goals. It asks for an inventory of natural landscape, provides a plan, and then provides that back to the legislature to help us do work in the years ahead. I want to spend a little time, though, talking about why we believe this is an important bill to move forward. Although I'm a cheerful person, I think by nature, I want to look at the findings with the Senate, starting in section 2 on page 2813. Because as a species, we're not very well equipped to sense and appreciate changes on a massive scale and over time. So General Assembly finds that nature is facing a catastrophic loss of biodiversity, both globally and locally. In addition to its intrinsic value, biodiversity is essential to human survival. According to the United Nations, 1 million species of plants and animals are threatened with extinction. And although there are 7 million species on the planet, one of them, humans have, our activity has altered almost 75% of the Earth's surface, squeezing wildlife and nature into ever smaller natural areas of the planet. just a little more. The health of ecosystems on which humans and all other species depend is deteriorating more rapidly than ever, affecting the very foundations of economies, livelihoods, food security, health, and quality of life worldwide. And the causes of the drivers of changes in nature rank as follows: changes in land, water, and sea use, direct exploitation of organisms, climate change, pollution, and invasive species, what we were talking about just earlier this morning in H31. So we have all been aware of these kinds of changes, and there have been a variety of programs in the state in order to try to address them and to help us address them. So they appear in the findings as well. You'll see a Vermont Forest Action Plan, a Forest Future Strategic Roadmap, a climate assessment, a climate action plan, the Vermont Conservation Design, Resilient Connected Landscape Projects, and Staying Connected initiatives, all led by different entities. And probably chief of them is the Vermont Fish and Wildlife, working with the Department of Natural Resources and Vermont conservation organizations to develop the Vermont Conservation Design, a framework to sustain the state's ecologically functional landscape into the future. When we were taking testimony and speaking with the Secretary of Natural Resources, we noted that there were a variety of other programs already stood up, and we wanted to know whether or not we had a 6-lane highway and we were just proposing to add a 7th lane to that highway, or were we doing something more helpful? And in this case, the answer is that we're doing something more helpful. All these efforts are going to inform and be drawn into a larger and more coherent program articulated in the bill. And I will then go to section 3, beginning on page 2816, which are the working sections of the bill to implement that program, drawing together the many programs I just listed from the findings section. In 2801, we offer definitions related to the terms around conservation. An important detail is in sub 6, then the nature of what we define as conservation. It is for the period now through 2030. We're focused on permanent conservation means. So folks might be familiar with Vermont Land Trust and conservation easements, permanent easements that keep that land conserved in perpetuity. But we also know that there are many different routes into conserving property, keeping it healthy and functional. For instance, the state's use value appraisal program, which we make an investment every year of roughly $60 million, and it helps keep a vast amount of land in the state of Vermont enrolled in a program that keeps it healthy and functional and green. So from 2030 to 2050, the definition of conservation includes both permanent conservation, like the kind of easements we're talking about. It also addresses and accounts for the kind of, you can say, impermanent conservation work that we do through use value and other programs like it. A former commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation often referred in our committee to a conservation ladder. There are often properties that are conserved, for instance, through use value appraisal. They're not in permanent conservation, but over time, the owners of that land, or maybe subsequent generations, will decide that they appreciate it in its current condition, so much so that they move to permanent conservation. So this supports different rungs on that conservation ladder. In 2802, on page 2817, we lay out conservation visions and goals, just as I was articulating. So 30% of the state's land by 2030 and 50% by 2050. In 2803, we get this sort of nuts and bolts section where we call for an inventory of lands so that we can be more knowledgeable about the condition of the state and the properties that we want to prioritize for conservation. In 2804, on page 2819, a conservation plan is developed. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, in consultation with the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources, shall develop a plan to implement the conservation goals just articulated and in the Vermont Conservation Design to meet the goals established by this bill. The plan shall be submitted for review to the House Committees on Environment and Energy and on Agriculture, Food Resiliency and Forestry, and to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. In sub B, we lay out what the plan must include. I'm going to drop down to sub C on 2819 and talk about the process to get there. In developing the plan, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, in consultation again with the Secretary, shall hold 12 or more public meetings on the plan from July 1 of this summer through December 31 of 2025 to solicit input from stakeholders. And I'm going to pause here to read this because it's a comprehensive and active outreach that's proposed. Stakeholders shall include private owners of forest lands and agricultural lands, land trusts, conservation organizations, environmental organizations, working land enterprises, outdoor recreation groups and businesses, indigenous groups and representatives from historically marginalized and disadvantaged communities, watershed groups, municipalities, regional planning commissions, conservation commissions, and relevant state and federal agencies. And the work product of this, the conserved land inventory shall be, so that there's a plan and it relies upon an inventory. In sub D, we specify that that inventory shall be updated biannually to track progress towards the vision and goals of the chapter. Data shall be made publicly available, and the Secretary shall report to the relevant committees on or before January 15th of each year with an update. Section 4 brings us to appropriations. There is money appropriated for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, as well as a position at the Agency of Natural Resources. Section 5 is the effective date, which is July 1 of this year. Committee vote is 500, and we ask for your support.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations for the report of the Committee on Appropriations. Senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Appropriations Committee reviewed the Appropriations Section 4 and concur with the proposal that's come to us for the $75,000 for the Vermont Housing Conservation Board outreach public hearings as described. And then the $150,000 for a limited service position. This is a position that will be in place for 3 years. The first year, as we understand it, is included in the budget for $150,000. The agency is currently applying for a grant from the America the Beautiful federal fund and will use those monies for the second and third year of the limited service position. So the committee voted 700 to support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in... Roll call has been requested. Was that Senator from Franklin? The question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy? Are you ready for the question? If so, a Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to share some of the background on the development of this bill. As it left the House, there was actually there was a significant amount of contention between, I'd say, different groups with an interest in our natural landscape. That could have been folks in the agricultural sector, the forestry sector, the Agency of Natural Resources, and environmental groups. Through a period of several weeks working with all those parties, they came to create a consensus design for the bill And I'm happy to report that this bill, as offered by the committee, reflects support of all the entities that I just named, including the Agency of Natural Resources.
So to be clear, this vote at the moment is to adopt the report of the Committee on Natural Resources in place of the underlying bill. Senator from Franklin.
President, I'm going to request a retraction of the request for the roll call and save that before third reading.
Without objection, we will accept that retraction of the request for roll. So the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And you have adopted the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Franklin, did you have a request for roll on this?
You'll have a request for roll call.
Shall the bill be read a third time? Senator from Franklin has requested the roll. Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collinsworth.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Bueller.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashimi.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchell. Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershlet.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale. Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Bihowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks. Senator Westman.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell. Senator Sears. Senator Weeks.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 20. Those voting nay, 7. And you have ordered third reading of H-126. We now have up for consideration H-171. H-171 was read the first time and referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which considered the same and recommended that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommended that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H-171, an act relating to adult protective services.
The bill can be found on page 2820 of today's calendar. For the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, the Senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to go through the bill first, Mr. President, if I might, and then refer to the proposal of amendment. And there's also on the calendar a proposal of amendment from a majority of the Committee on Health and Welfare that we would like to have serve as a substitute, but I would yield to the senator from Chittenden North to, what is it?
Chittenden Central.
Oh, gosh. Chittenden Central. To confirm that this would be a replacement proposal. Two members of the committee were not able to present to sign on, but I will yield to the senator to ask that this be a replacement. Can I do that? A substitute? So it would just take strike number 6 from this, and then everything else is the same. Yeah. Yes. Oh, it's got my name first. How'd that happen? So I believe there is an amendment that has Senator, my name first, Mr. President, so if we could pass that out.
Right, we understand that amendment, maybe it sounds like the senator from Chittenden Central should have been the first name on it.
Yes.
We're just trying to determine now the order of the report. If you want to be describing the whole bill prior to the substitute, then you would need to be doing that prior to the substitute vote. If we do the substitute vote, that person would do the report.
I'm fine with doing that, Mr. President.
Okay, so for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a very important bill. It updates the statutes relating to adult protective services that have not been updated in between 30 and 40 or 50 years. It depends on which section you look at, but it's been a long time coming. And so it is a long bill. It is complicated. But what I would like to do is to go through, give an overview of the bill so that there is an understanding of what's happening and the changes that are being made. And then we will present the proposal of amendment from Senate Health and Welfare. Obviously, older adults and those with disabilities can be vulnerable to abuse. And so this section of statute relates to the health and welfare of those vulnerable adults who may be adversely affected through abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So one of the purposes of the bill is to look at these folks and understand the conditions under which they need to be protected and the conditions under which conditions of abuse may be determined. So the bill provides some definitions for abuse and exploitation. The bill looks at the reporting of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. And one of the key things that happens in the bill is a streamlined list of mandatory reporters when abuse might occur. So it deals with all employees, contractors, volunteers, grantees who directly provide health care, law enforcement, caregiving, counseling, education, or social services to adults who know of or have a reason to suspect abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a vulnerable adult. So those folks would be mandatory reporters for reporting to the Department of Aging, Independent Living whenever abuse or neglect might occur. The bill also looks at language about documentation of a report. The bill also has an update to the abuse registry. So someone who is investigated and found to be guilty of abuse or neglect for a vulnerable adult could be placed on the registry by the Department of Aging and Independent Living. The bill has updated the process for assessing if someone or if an allegation constitutes abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And so the assessment is a process whereby the Department of Aging and Independent Living might evaluate whether or not a report is worthy of a further investigation. And then the bill goes on to look at the investigatory process and updates that investigatory process so that there is a timeline to make sure that the investigation goes on in a timely manner and that reporting comes back in a timely manner. So the one business day of the receipt of the report involving a serious injury, hospitalization, sexual abuse, or ongoing harm, that is the time, within the 24-hour period, then the Department of Aging, Independent Living would begin an an assessment or an investigation. And then the determination would be made by the department as to whether or not abuse has occurred. The assessment is the time, as I indicated earlier, when determination is made as to whether or not the report is reasonable based on the information. The assessment does include an interview with the reporter as well as the alleged victim. And then the investigation may or may not result. If their determination is made that the report is legitimate, then an investigation is made by the Department of Aging and Independent Living to notify and will notify the reporter that an investigation will be ongoing. The alleged victim is also notified within 5 business days if an investigation is going to happen. At the conclusion of investigation, it's either substantiated or not substantiated. The commissioner of the department may place the individual who has, if it is substantiated, may place the person's name on the abuse registry. And then recommendations might be made with regard to education or other conditions for the person who's on the registry. The alleged perpetrator may seek administrative review of the placement on the registry by notifying Dale within 14 days after the date they're listed. If there's a case pending in criminal or family division of the Superior Court, out of the same conduct, Dale can place the perpetrator's name on the registry while the case is pending. Upon the resolution of that case, then Dale can remove, upon request, the name of the person from that abuse registry. The department has the burden of proving that a reasonable person would believe the vulnerable adult was abused, neglected, or exploited by the alleged perpetrator by a preponderance of the evidence, which is the lowest bar. And then there's a period of time within which any after hearing conclusion, there could be a review, there can be an appeal to what's known as the Human Services Board by the person who has been placed on the registry. There's also an opportunity for remedial action for the individual who has been determined to have abused a vulnerable adult. There's also a section in the bill that prevents retaliatory action by any employer when the person has been perpetrated his or her own maltreatment. Let's see. And then there's information that the Adult Protective Services might ask for in the determination of any report. And the Adult Protective Services can have access to records, documents, client identifying information, financial records, medical and psychological records necessary to perform its duties. And what was not in the underlying bill was a language relating to HIPAA, and you'll see in our proposal amendment, we've added that. It's our 7th proposal. And then, as I indicated earlier, there is a registry, and the registry does maintains the names of individuals who have been reported or convicted of a crime, or convicted or determined to have caused maltreatment of a vulnerable adult. Finally, there's an update to the penalties for abuse and neglect or if a mandatory reporter fails to report. And the update, that's an update in the amount of the fines that are accessed. It's not a new fine, it's just an update. And then there is a requirement in the bill that any communications from the department or the administrative reviewer or the Human Services Board be in plain language so that it is understandable by the general public. That's it, Mr. President. That is it for sort of the summary of the bill. And I would like to move, if I could, to the proposal of amendment that we have. And I believe sequence we would like to go.
I believe what would be most appropriate would be if you are reporting the committee amendment found on page 2820, halfway down through the majority of page 2821. That would be most appropriate because the following amendment actually is not a substitute amendment, it is amending the committee amendment. So if you'd like to offer the committee amendment at this time, I think that would be appropriate.
I will offer the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll be referring to the page numbers of the bill that you have before you. So in the first instance of amendment, we are modifying the definition that is the definition of abuse. So the modification that we would provide would strike out the phrase "or negligently" and place the word "or" in front of "recklessly," so that the abuse definition would then read any medical treatment that purposely, knowingly, or recklessly places the life, health, or welfare of a vulnerable adult in jeopardy or is likely to result in impairment of health of the vulnerable adult. We took out negligently because it seems to be quite subjective and difficult to define, and there are other areas of the definition that would cover things like omissions or timeliness or confinement or seclusion. So those things that are more adequately measured. Our second proposal of amendment is on page 8 of the bill, and it goes along with the first proposal of amendment. So in the second proposal of amendment, we are asking to remove the phrase "or negligent" and then put the word "or" in front of reckless, so that the definition of neglect means purposeful, knowing, reckless failure or omission by a caregiver that has resulted in or could be expected to result in physical, psychological harm, including a failure or omission and then following. Our third proposal of amendment is back on page 5. And I went through number 2 because I think it's consistent with the first definition. Our third proposal of amendment is a definition of, in the definition of caregiver, excuse me. And we struck A and combined B and C of the definition of caregiver, and to be certain that it is a designated, a person designated to provide care. And to provide a more efficient definition. Our fourth proposal of amendment is on page 13 of the bill. I'll find this page along with you. The fourth proposal of amendment involves a definition of a vulnerable adult and the personal care individual, the vulnerable adult, and we're adding the phrase is determined to be clinically eligible to receive long-term Medicaid waiver services. This is someone who would be in long-term care and under Medicaid and would be considered to be vulnerable. Similarly, our fifth proposal of amendment adds that phrase as well. That's also on page 13 in section 1, 33 VSA 69, Chapter 1, 6902, 34C. The sixth proposal amendment, I'm going to skip over for a minute, and then I'll come back to it. The seventh proposal of amendment adds language that precludes the access of information that's protected by HIPAA when the agency is looking for the records and information regarding someone who has been accused of abuse, of providing abuse to a vulnerable adult. I'll go back to the sixth proposal amendment, which is the seventh proposal amendment was on page 34. The sixth proposal amendment is on page 13. And one of the issues that we faced in committee was that there was a request to tie the abuse to the vulnerability of the adult. And this became a concern to us, which is why you'll see the further proposal of amendment. So if someone is physically vulnerable to abuse but is cognitively sound, they're still at risk of financial exploitation. So we felt that tying the abuse to the vulnerability of the individual didn't make sense. We felt it would narrow the scope so much for people to be protected in whatever stage they're in, whether it's in a stage of disability or a stage of an older person. It was included in our initial proposal, and then on further thinking, as the senator from Chittenden Central will indicate, we are asking to have that one deleted. So that is a report, Mr. President, including the report of the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Senator. The bill was then referred to Committee on Finance, which considered the same and recommended that when the bill be amended, the bill ought to pass. For the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Chittenden.
Mr. President, your Committee on Finance reviewed the bill and voted it favorably out of committee 502. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, it's my understanding there is another amendment in the calendar. It is to amend the proposal of amendment as offered by the Senator by the Committee on Health and Welfare. It's also my understanding that the Senator from Chittenden Central is more than happy to have the Senator from Chittenden Southeast be the lead on that amendment as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. The sixth proposal amendment, as I indicated, ties the individual's abuse to the individual's vulnerability. And the committee would like to strike that sixth proposal and leave the bill intact, the underlying bill intact, so that it wouldn't harm the individual. As I indicated earlier, we call this the Stephen Hawking, I suppose, proposal, where someone is physically vulnerable but may have a sharp mind, nevertheless may be vulnerable to financial exploitation. And we would like to ask that this sixth instance be struck as recommended in the proposal of amendment from the majority of your Senate Health and Welfare folks. I did not read the list of witnesses. The underline on our vote of the bill out of committee was 500, and we did hear from House Member Representative Noyes. We heard from Ledge Council. We heard from the Director of Adult Protect Services in Dale. We heard from the Director of Licensing Protection Department of Dale. We heard from the General Counsel at Dale. We heard from the Executive Director for the Vermont Council of Developmental and Mental Health Services for the Vermont Care Partners. We heard from the Community of Vermont Elders. We heard from Vermont Legal Aid, American Nurses Association of Vermont, the Senior Director of Nursing at Howard Center, the Executive Director of the VNAs of Vermont, the Executive Director of the Vermont Medical Society, and Vice President for Government Relations for the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. Thank you, Mr. President.
So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden, Southeast, and others? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have amended the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare as offered by the Senator from Chittenden, Southeast, and others. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Health and Welfare as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Health and Welfare as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H171. We now have up for consideration H488. H488 was originally read and referred to Committee on Government Operations, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill be amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H488, an act relating to approval of the adoption of the Charter of the Town of Ludlow.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Government Operations, Senator from Windsor, Senator White.
I'm the last thing, I believe, before lunch, so I will be brief. Your Senate Government Operations recommends support for the change of the Ludlow Charter. The change can be found in your calendar today on page 2822. Ludlow is a beautiful community. If you've ever skied in Vermont, you've probably been to Ludlow. They chose to amend their charter, to change their charter, to give the town and the governing body the authority to alternate between Australian ballot and a floor vote. The vote that the community took was a 75% support rate for this charter change. They voted 653 to 213 in favor. Your Government Operations Committee appreciated the sentiment behind the charter, but wanted to make sure that it was narrow in scope, to not allow for gaming of when something would be Australian vote or when something would be a floor vote. So we did amend the charter to narrow it to help meet that. It's a very brief change, and I would ask the body to support it.
President Sheldon, open amendment offered by the Committee on Government Operations is ready for question. If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. That is now the amended bill adopted by the Committee on Government Operations. Question now is on the bill read a third time. Ready for the question. If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have ordered third reading of H488. Senator from Chittenden Central. That does complete the orders of the day, but I didn't know if you wanted to make the motion before then. We could do it either way. That completes the orders of the day. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules to message actions taken this morning, and that would be on H45, an act relating to abusive litigation filed against survivors of domestic abuse, stalking, or sexual assault. H157, an act relating to the Vermont Basic Needs Budget. H291, an act relating to the creation of the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. H386, an act relating to approval of amendments to the Charter of the Town of Brattleboro. And H470, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to alcoholic beverage.
Now the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions to House forthwith on H45, H157, H291, H386, and H470. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to message your action taken on the following bills to the House forthwith. H45, an act relating to abusive litigation filed against survivors of domestic abuse, stalking, or sexual assault. H157, an act relating to the Vermont Basic Needs Budget. H291, an act relating to the creation of the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. H386, an act relating to approval of amendments to the Charter to the Town of Brattleboro. And H470, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to alcoholic beverage laws. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. Wednesday, May 10.
Now, pending announcements, Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that Senate stand adjournment until Wednesday, May 10th at 10 a.m. Are there any announcements? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Government Operations Committee will meet today at 1:30. Thank you.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Senate Education will meet at 1:15 today. Thank you.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. A reminder that Senate Health and Welfare will meet by Zoom at 8:45 tomorrow morning with a joint meeting with Senate Judiciary in our committee room.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Natural Resources and Energy will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two announcements. Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs will be at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And the Senate Democratic Caucus will meet at 12:45. We have important short business to do, and I'd appreciate everybody getting their lunch and being on time if they could, because my objective is to be done by 1. Thank you very much.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand adjournment until Wednesday, May 10th at 10 a.m. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjournment until Wednesday, May 10th at 10 a.m.